This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
Between the kids being home and hosting, everything in our house gets used up in summer. With Instacart, I can save money by stocking up on all my favorite summer brands. I save time by getting everything delivered in as fast as an hour. And I save myself a sink full of dirty dishes by stocking up on paper plates for the annual summer cookout. Save more on summer essentials? Spend more time enjoying summer. Add summer to cart. Download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Jaime Dunaway-Seale about how toxic company culture is fueling the Great Resignation. Jaime Dunaway-Seale, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to be with you today. You're joining me from Dallas, Texas area. I am on the Big Island in Hawaii for work this week. So I'm joining you from my kind of strange and tropical location. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join me and share some insights with me and my audience from a new report out from Clever Real Estate, a real estate data company, titled Toxic Company Culture is Fueling the Great Resignation. Now, this combines a few different components that are just my favorite to talk about. Toxicity, company culture, the Great Resignation, all of those I think are super timely, super important. I love that they're all being brought together and taking the opportunity to look over the report a little bit. It looks like you're doing some good research. So we're going to unpack this and find out more about what this means for employers and for leaders and how we can do better for our people so we can attract and retain good talent and not constantly have the revolving door and having our good people leave for, what they might think are greener pastures somewhere else. As we get started, I wanted to share Jaime's bio with everybody. Jaime Dunaway-Seale is a content writer at Clever Real Estate, the leading real estate education platform for home buyers, sellers, and investors. Prior to joining Clever, Jaime worked full-time as a journalist. Her writings about education, government, business, and sports have appeared in Slate, the Associated Press, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and Advocate Media. Jaime graduated with a Master's of Arts in Journalism from the University of Missouri and a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism and International Relations from the University of Arkansas. Great background. It's a pleasure to have you. Anything else you would like to share about yourself and or the company before we dive on into the report and unpack it a bit?
Real Estate Witch has done a lot of research recently about the Great Resignation and what makes employees unhappy. So I'm really excited that those two coincided, and I think it really gives us a more complete picture of what's going on in the workplace.
Wonderful. And just on a personal note, I note your degree from the University of Missouri, and that's where I'm from and where my family, my parents live. And so I get back there often to visit, and Midwest is wonderful. And I love Missouri. So I'm
Oh,
sure
it's
you
so
had a
good
great
to
time.
talk with another Missourian. Feels like home.
It does. It does. Well, great. So as we start to get into this report, why don't you start by just explaining the methodology a little bit for us? How was the data collected? And then we can start to talk about some of the high level findings and key takeaways.
So we did a survey of 1,000 full-time employees in February, and we asked them questions about their workplace, about what they're frustrated by, what makes them unhappy, what makes them, actually happy. And we synthesized this and came up with our results. Pretty simple.
Yeah, excellent. 1,000 workers. And what types of jobs? What kind of are the demographics of this 1,000 worker sample?
It's all types of professions, everything from retail to, corporate jobs, all ranges of employees, from the CEO to an entry-level worker. They're from all over the country, and the demographics are also very diverse. We have, white workers, non-white workers, Black workers, all from all over the country.
Excellent. So a pretty good snapshot at this point in time of what people are dealing with and what is driving satisfaction and engagement in the workplace, or dissatisfaction, disengagement, and people wanting to leave and trying to go somewhere else. And it's interesting, during the Great Resignation, as we've been talking about this, I'm not sure when the term got coined, but I think I started to hear people talking about the Great Resignation even about a year ago. And then it's just gotten more and more legs, and people are talking about it all the time. And some people refer to it as the Great Awakening, or there's kind of these different terminologies, but all of it comes down to the fact that during the pandemic, people have had the opportunity to kind of challenge assumptions, challenge the status quo, take stock and self-reflect on like what their priorities are, what's most important to them. And after, for many people, after a year or 2 years of working remotely or in a hybrid environment and having that flexibility and a taste of that autonomy and not having the big long commutes and all of that, people have realized that they don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to that lifestyle. And as they've taken stock and they've looked at how their companies handled the pandemic, some companies handled it very well and were compassionate and empathetic towards their people and very supportive. Other companies, not so much. And so all of this has added to this current situation of people really taking stock and leaving in mass. And it's really hard right now for organizations to get good people. I mean, it especially was hard. It was already hard in STEM, in tech, and some of these specialized types of fields. But now we're talking about any job, like fast food, right? Retail, anything. Like, it doesn't need to be some high tech, white collar kind of position. Companies are having a hard time finding anyone to fill any job. And it's not because there aren't workers, but it's because workers are being more picky, and they are really thinking about what matters most to them. And some employers have leaned into the Great Resignation and tried to accommodate the needs and desires of workers, and others are really fighting back and battling, and they're trying to go back to pre-pandemic kind of context and pretend like it never happened and put the genie back in the bottle. I just don't think that's going to happen.
I agree with you. I think that, like you said, people have really become more aware of the advantages of working from home. It's a lot more flexible. You can have greater work-life balance, and employers who try and force people to go back into that very, kind of rigid 9 to 5, you have to come into the office every day. Like, that's not the way that people want to work anymore. And especially with, some of like the essential businesses that we saw during the pandemic, like retail, fast food workers, they have been kind of bearing the brunt of some of people's frustrations, just with the pandemic, with everything going on. And so they particularly find themselves in this toxic workplace environment. So that's, one reason that they quit, and that they are being more selective in the job that they find next. Like, they're not wanting to go back into that same environment.
Yeah. I've listeners know I have 6 children. My 3 oldest daughters, ages 18, 16, 14, they all work in retail and or fast food, teenage jobs, and it's great. But it's been super interesting to see just how it's impacted them. And my 14-year-old daughter in Utah, you can get a worker's permit and work at 14. So she's working, not a lot, but she's working a little bit at the age of 14, saving up money. And she had a bidding war for her at 14 for different companies. And she was able to drive up her wage because of that. And I'm like, my goodness, in what world, pre-pandemic would a 14-year-old ever have that, right? And that just shows you the state of affairs, right? And the other day, it was last week, I was going out just to a sandwich place with my wife for lunch. And it was like our favorite sandwich place, a popular place, usually pretty busy. As we pull up to the drive-through, there's a big sign saying, due to staffing shortage, we're closing today at 2. And it was the weekend. Wow. It was the weekend, like probably their busiest time, and they're not going to be open on a Friday evening, right? That's crazy.
That is crazy. Like short-staffed, that's one thing that, we just talked about is, people are looking for better working conditions, but also like if I'm in an environment that is short-staffed, like that means I have to do more work, and that's exhausting. That's hard on me. It prevents me from maybe taking a vacation that I need or, want to go on just for my mental health. And so, yeah, I would consider leaving too. And that's one of the things we found in the report was that quitting was kind of contagious. If someone resigned and were so like connected with some of the employees back at their old job, they would hear about other people leaving, within like 6 months. And so much of, what makes a company and what makes a positive environment is the people that you work with. So if it's, if people are leaving and it's not quite the same, like I might jump ship too.
Yeah. And a lot of my own research, I've looked at these issues, and relationships at work are consistently one of the important drivers for whether or not someone's satisfied and engaged and feeling fulfilled at work. And it can be a pretty kind of gross, toxic company culture. But if your group right around you that you work with every day is really positive and you have good relationships with them, that can mitigate a lot of the company issues. But the opposite is also true. It can be an amazing company, great culture, and you have a jerk boss. And guess what? People that work there aren't going to be happy. So, those kind of components really add into what we're talking about today. And like you said, the contagion, people do start to jump ship when they see things going downhill, or the good people that are around them that they like working with leave. And there's usually a reason, and people start to recognize, in the last couple of months, these 2 or 3 people have left. Where have they gone? What are their opportunities? Maybe I should be looking, right? And all of this process starts to happen, and lo and behold, people start to leave. And then you just find yourself really, really stuck. I found myself in that kind of a situation. So I'm a university professor. I do consulting stuff as well as, things like this podcast. But, I'm a university professor first and foremost, and I'm a department chair. So I have a department admin who helps with a lot of the administrative, just kind of nuts and bolts, logistical things of the courses and all, all that kind of stuff, right? I had someone retire who had been in the position for a while. She retired over the summer. It took me almost 6 months to find a replacement for her. And like you said, guess what that meant? That meant I was doing my job. I was doing that job. and let me tell you, it's one thing for like a couple weeks or a month or maybe a couple months to try to do that. Man, after 6 months, I was feeling so burned out from just doing multiple people's jobs. And I was so thrilled when I finally was able to find somebody to do the position, and that person's been working out great, and it's been awesome. But that's the reality, to your point earlier, that people are feeling pressured, they're feeling stress and anxiety, they're feeling burned out because they're not just doing their job anymore, they're doing multiple jobs, and they're trying to wrestle with all this other stuff that's going on. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Academy. Courses, micro-credentials, and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. All HCI Academy courses, micro-credentials, and certificates are designed, developed, and delivered by award-winning and internationally renowned scholars, educators, thought leaders, executives, and practitioners. Our courses, micro-credentials, and certificates will help you make your mark on the future of work and make an immediate impact in your organizations. Check out the HCI Academy and our many course offerings and certificates to upskill and reskill for the future of work. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.
Exactly. It's really tough environment right now. And one of the interesting things that we found in our study is that, employers aren't unaware of what's going on, but they are a little bit unwilling to change the environment. I think our statistic was like, if someone resigns, there's usually an exit interview and they give feedback, but only 28% of employers are willing to make changes based on that feedback. And so, in that case, the employee just walks.
Yeah, well, and it's crazy. The whole idea of an exit interview, I guess it's better than nothing to get some feedback as people are leaving. But man, that's too late. You don't want to be getting feedback when people are out the door. You want to be getting feedback when they're starting to feel disengaged, when they're starting to feel like something's up, when they're starting to look for other jobs. And the only way that can happen is if supervisors, managers, and leaders in the organization are paying attention to their people, and they're having regular conversations and dialogues with their people and trying to understand what they're dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can have that kind of a relationship with your people and just be aware of what's going on, then instead of an exit interview, you have stay interviews. You have like, what do we need to do in order to keep you here and engaged and happy? And that is something that will actually help you, because then you'll be able to keep your good people. And like you said, not only do a lot of companies not even do exit interviews, when companies do exit interviews, most of the time they don't act on anything from it, and so it's a completely worthless kind of an activity.
Yeah, and I think by doing those stay interviews, it really gives the employee the feeling that their employer cares about them, and that just that does so much for building loyalty to your company and just creating a positive environment that employees are more willing to stay in for the long term.
In the report, you talk a lot about toxicity, and that's some of the major findings. You asked people about really what were the key drivers for them wanting to stay versus leave, and some of those sorts of things. Tell us a little bit more about those findings and what types of toxicity tend to be most problematic.
I think one of the big things is how many people are frustrated with their managers. We've touched on this a little bit, but 75% of employees have some sort of frustration, and whether that's unclear communication, or they think their manager is incompetent, or their manager is just cruel and mean. That's huge. Like, you interact with your manager on a daily basis. Probably you're getting feedback and performance reviews from your manager that might be dependent on if you get a raise or a promotion in the company. So those relationships really should be prioritized, and they should, managers should really think about how they're interacting and treating their employees. Absolutely,
we need to pay attention to that. And people don't expect their bosses to be perfect. So on the one hand, as you're saying, that 75% statistic, I can kind of predict in the minds of some people as they hear that, they're like, well, that's just because everyone complains and nobody, everyone grumbles about their boss. Everyone grumbles about work. I'm like, yeah, well, that's true to an extent. And people like to kind of get together with coworkers and kind of complain about stuff at work. That's a thing, right? But I think we're talking about something a bit different here. While people tend to like to be able to vent about work a little bit, people are also, they tend to be fairly forgiving of things that aren't perfect. Like nobody expects perfection. They understand that you're, supervisor or a boss, they're dealing with stuff too, and it's hectic and everything. So when I hear a number like that, instead of just assuming, well, it's just because everyone's complaining, no, I think it really is because there are so many instances where people just feel unvalued, unappreciated. And it's not just a matter of someone, maybe not communicating quite as well as they should have, though that certainly is a driver. But it's the toxic behaviors. It's the jerk behaviors. It's when, you just can't, you get up in the morning, you're like, oh, I can't believe I have to go to work today with this person. And you're like walking on eggshells, worried about, they're going to embarrass you in front of your coworkers. They're going to scream at you, whatever, all these bully behaviors. There are so many of them and they're pervasive. So many leaders don't really know how to lead. And it's not necessarily even intentional, but they find themselves in difficult situations and then they end up taking it out on their people and they end up being jerks, even unintentionally. And those types of situations, that creates that toxicity where it's just unsafe. It's psychologically an unsafe environment where people feel like they're walking on eggshells and they're not free. They don't have the autonomy or the freedom to be able to try and experiment and to do new things. And when you're in that kind of an environment, it sucks all kinds of meaning, purpose, and fulfillment out of the work that you do. Even if you love your job and you love the work that you do, that kind of an environment just sucks it out of you. And then you're just fearful about, am I going to be able to keep my job? Am I going to get reprimanded? Am I going to get in trouble if this one thing I'm trying doesn't quite work out? And then, lo and behold, there's only so long you're going to be willing to put up with that. One of two things tends to happen. You either get fed up and you start looking for another job and you leave, or you tend to psychologically withdraw and you stay in the job, but you just disengage. And you're like, I'm just going to put my head down. I'm just going to stay below the radar, kind of just do my thing, do the bare minimum and get out of here at the end of the day. Both of those outcomes are really bad for organizations. We don't want either of those. We want to keep people actively engaged and productive and innovating in their positions. That can only happen in an environment of psychological safety. And psychological safety does not exist when you have toxicity and a jerk boss. It's just the way it works, right?
Exactly. And I think that that's another reason why employees want to work from home. There are all these great advantages. And one of them is like getting away from your boss and this toxic environment, or maybe toxic coworkers. You can be a little bit more isolated in an environment that you are more in control of and that you maybe feel a little bit more safe.
So from the report, what are some of those kind of, based on these toxicity findings and the culture issues that we've been talking about, what are some of the specific things, tangible, actionable things that leaders listening today can take away from this research and start doing to make a difference in their teams and their organizations?
Right. It's not just about higher pay and better benefits, although those are still really important, So you need to have a living wage and you need to give your employees adequate PTO. That it's going to make them feel valued. Those are huge things for employees when they're looking for a job or deciding whether or not to leave. But if you have a very generous PTO policy, but you're not encouraging your employees to take that, it doesn't do any good. They're still going to get burnt out. So employers really need to create an environment where they encourage employees to take their PTO for their mental health reasons, for rest, to boost their creativity when they come back. That's something that's really important. They also need to, it's super simple, but just be kind to their employees. I feel like you shouldn't have to tell people to do that, but you do. And I know that work can get really stressful sometimes, but that's not necessarily an excuse to take it out, on your employees. Don't harass them. Don't bully them. These are super simple things that is people are very capable of doing. You also want to create an environment where everyone feels welcome. So like, just think about your hiring practices and your promotion practices and make sure that, you're not operating with some like implicit bias, so that, women and minorities feel that they have an equal shot.
Yeah. So many good things that you just mentioned there. And it isn't rocket science. It really comes down to basic, just be good to each other, be kind, treat people with dignity and respect. Don't be a jerk. That's like with my kids, like, I'm sure I'm not a perfect parent and there's things I mess up all the time. My one goal with my kids is to help them grow into productive adults that aren't jerks. And I feel like if I can do that, I've been pretty successful as a parent. And honestly, in the workplace, I think it's the same. Like, it's not super complicated. Be kind to people, treat them with dignity and respect. Don't be a jerk. And then go from there. And then, there's other things you can do to be supportive and proactively, help people and such. There's a lot of good things to do, but start with the basics, build the foundation that will help you to establish mutual accountability and trust with your people, which will then feed into everything else and create that psychologically safe, positive environment instead of that toxic culture, that toxic environment that's going to drive people away. Mm-hmm. Well, Jaime, it has been a pleasure. I note the time and I'm going to have to let you go here in just a few minutes. But before we wrap up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Absolutely. So if anyone wants to reach out, they can email me, jaime.seale@movewithclever.com. I'm also on Twitter @JaimeSeale. Definitely welcome any comments or suggestions, any good study ideas. We're always on the lookout for those. It's been really interesting working on this topic. I was one of the great resigners who moved jobs in the past year. And, I just personally related to a lot of the stuff that we were seeing in our studies. So, a lot of people have really gone on to find better jobs, better working conditions, better environments. And it's worth it if you're thinking about it. You have to evaluate your own finances, but your mental health is totally worth it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jaime. It has been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Jaime and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership, the journey of becoming a truly remarkable leader. Early in my adult life, I learned about an Asian proverb that translates as bluer than indigo. If you think about the color indigo, it is a brilliant, deep, and vibrant blue, what some would call the bluest of blues. To have something that is bluer than indigo is rare and truly remarkable. Contrary to popular myth, there is no one-size-fits-all or cookie-cutter approach to effective leadership. There is no silver bullet, no secret sauce, no go-to model that will solve all of your problems. The truth is, great leaders have all had their unique strengths and flaws, and have all had to discover and then pave their own distinctive path in their life's journey to fulfill their leadership potential. Bluer Than Indigo Leadership will help you discover your own path and explore those ordinary, everyday actions that will help you respond to an uncertain future and produce extraordinary results for your individuals, teams, and organizations. Check out Human Capital Innovations magazine, Human Capital Leadership. Human Capital Leadership is a free, interactive e-magazine with the mission to help individuals, leaders, and organizations find innovative approaches to maximize their human capital potential. We publish issues quarterly in August, November, February, and May. Take a look at the latest issue and let us know what you think. The Alchemy of Truly Remarkable Leadership, ordinary, everyday actions that produce extraordinary results. Consider how the nature of work has shifted over the past 50 years. With increased globalization, rapid technological advancement, and the shift in economic composition, the average job of today looks very different than the average job of 50 years ago. What will the jobs and organizations of tomorrow look like? Moreover, what does this all mean for organizational leaders? What are the core competencies and capabilities of organizations and their leadership that are prepared for continued disruption and geopolitical and socioeconomic shifts? Regardless of what the future holds, increasingly, leaders need to be socially minded, data-driven, decisive, champions of talent, and disruptors of the traditional notions of leadership, teams, organizations, and work. The alchemy of truly remarkable leadership will help you to explore your own leadership competencies and capabilities and consider ways to apply and implement them into your workplace and personal life. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.